Good morning. Oh, we can do better than that. Let's try that again. Well, my turn first. Okay, here we go. Good morning. Oh, all right. There we go. We're here. Whenever we gathered in this sacred space, it is made more sacred by the presence and attention of each and every one of us. Whether we are here in the sanctuary or attending by live stream from places far and near or viewing sometime in the future, we are here together. I invite you to turn to the camera and wave to our live streaming friends. Let us take a moment now to turn and greet one another.
Welcome, everyone, to this morning's service of the Winchester Unitarian Society, a caring religious community devoted to spiritual growth, social transformation, and environmental responsibility. As a welcoming congregation, we affirm the full inclusion of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. My name is Martin Newhouse, and I am serving as worship associate this morning. As Unitarian Universalists, our faith does not require us to believe in a dogma, a tenet, or a creed, and among us we believe many different things. We prize freedom of thought and open, honest discussion and questioning because these, we believe, enrich both our spiritual lives and our work in the community. And I'm fond of reminding us that indeed we can still say today, as the very first minister of this society, Richard Metcalf, did over 100 years ago, quote, "We do not regard even the best creed as final. We look for new truths and new statements of old ones. We maintain the unlimited right of free inquiry." But while our faith does not impose any dogma or belief, we recognize that it does call on us to do certain things, and among these we recognize and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And in that spirit, we greet with joy and fellowship all who are gathered with us this morning, both in person and via live streaming. We'll welcome you all. And now we have three important announcements to be delivered by separate speakers. And first, I will invite Sheila Rudolph Correa to come up on behalf of the nominating committee.
Good morning. So I am here today proudly wearing my nominating and leadership development committee hat. And when I was reflecting on what to say to all of you, I thought, it could be fun to use a little gimmick. I could change hats to illustrate each of the committees I've been serving on here at the church. And then I realized that was going to take a lot of hats. Aside from revealing that I have difficulty saying no to people, it says something important about the Winchester Unitarian Society, that we have so much to offer as a community. The first committee I joined was Fellowship, which was a fantastic way to get to know people. And since then, I have had the pleasure of serving on the Religious Education Committee, Intern Minister Committee, Pledge Team, Committee of Shared Ministry, Membership Committee, and I'm a Pastoral Care Associate, and I think that's everything. Thank you. What I've discovered through this journey is that committee work is a wonderful way to be involved and to feel a sense of belonging. The more I have contributed to the Winchester Unitarian Society, the more fulfilled I've felt, and the closer I've become to my friends here. On Sunday, February 2nd, we are holding our annual Sunday, the committee fair in Betkoff Hall after the service. Each of you will receive a passport, and every table you visit will earn you a stamp, redeemable for a delicious topping for your ice cream. Come learn about the good things our committees are doing and explore how you can become more engaged in our community. And just so you know, Fritzy will be bringing her famous hot fudge, so you don't want to miss that. Thank you.
Next, I want to invite the chair of our standing committee, Gordy McIntosh, to give an announcement about the search committee selection process.
Thank you, Martin. I'm Gordy McIntosh, chair of the standing committee, the board of the operating board of the church. If you didn't see it, I would like you can look back at our search process that I posted in highlights last week. Selecting a search team is the work of both the leadership and the entire congregation. The team should represent the entire congregation. The team should be trusted by the congregation. The team should be in touch with the challenging nature of the congregation. It's very important work that the search committee will be doing over the next year to bring to us a settled minister in 2026, April, May 2026. So the survey for nominations will schedule to go out this Friday in a designated email. It won't go out in highlights, but following highlights, there will be opportunities with links and QR codes for people to go to the survey. If you're not comfortable with the survey and you'd like to speak to a member of the standing committee, we are happy to attend to all your questions and concerns, and we'll take your nominations as well. There'll be more information to follow on that. I'd like to ask the standing committee members who are here to please stand so people know who they are. And I'd like to ask the standing committee to take a red cup during coffee hour so people can recognize them in coffee hour if they have any questions. And also I'd like to ask the standing committee to meet briefly for 5 minutes after the service at front of the sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordy. And finally, an announcement from Reverend Seth.
I'm not used to standing over here. All right. Hi, I got to talk into that one. I'm going to turn, can I use this? I like this better. Thank you. Okay, just easier. So I'm here on behalf of the transition team. Hopefully you saw the special email announcement that went out on Friday, which is that there is going to be a special transition team event as part of your work of interim ministry this afternoon after the service at 12 here in the sanctuary called the Ritual of Release. There's going to be food beforehand, and I believe there's going to be childcare, so everybody should hopefully be able to come who wants to. And I really hope that you will show up. Because what this event is that we're going to answer two main questions. The first, we're going to have some time to answer for those who are grieving Reverend Heather's departure, your previous settled minister, for those who might be new. For those who are grieving, we're going to share some of our positive experiences of Heather and things that you're really going to miss about her and her ministry. And then there will be an opportunity for people who have had a negative experience, who might have a grudge or some forgiveness work to do, something to let go of. For Heather. All of this is in service, of making space for the next minister. We want to both do our grieving and do our forgiving work so that we have space to welcome the new settled minister into the congregation when that happens. As you just heard, the search committee is even starting to get formed. And I'll say one more thing about this, which is it isn't just about the making space. The other part of the reason we are having this event is to create a shared story, right? The theme of our service today is the power of story. And something that will be really important for you to have moving forward is a shared understanding of the congregational experience of Reverend Heather's ministry. So it may be that you personally had a really positive experience with Reverend Heather, but there are some folks who probably didn't in some ways, and it's important for you to know that. Likewise, if you had a negative experience of Reverend Heather, then you want to hear some of the positive stories so that you can start to have a shared congregational story that holds all the complexities of Reverend Heather's time with you. And so I really hope you will show up today. And there's also a virtual version of this event. We'll do the same exact thing on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. The link is in the email. So I hope you'll show up either today or on Tuesday, because we need both your voice and your story, as well as your listening ears, so that you can hear other people's stories. Thank you.
So we're about to start our service, and remember that after the service, we're all invited to enjoy a light lunch and then come back here at noon for the first ritual release session. And now let us open our hearts and minds to the spirit of worship. I'd now like to invite Alex Kent to come up to light our chalice. And our chalice reading is Letting Go by Jay Wolin. Are we a people of holding on or of letting go? Holding on to rigid ideas or letting go and opening our minds and our hearts to something new? Holding on to certainty of how things should be or letting go and living with the uncertainty of new ways of being in the world? Holding on to what makes us comfortable or letting go so we may grow, which can be uncomfortable? Holding on to what makes us safe or letting go to make room to help others feel safe? With this flame, this symbol of our religion, let it be a symbol of burning up the ties that hold us back from being our true self and reaching our true potential. Let it be a symbol of lighting a new way for us into a better tomorrow. And let it be a symbol of letting go, because holding on too long and too tightly is never good for the soul. And now please rise in body or spirit to join in singing our opening hymn, hymn number 95 in the gray hymnal, There Is More Love Somewhere.
All right, at this time, I'm going to ask our youngest to come on down, please. All right, so talking about the power of story, we have a little story today. And you all are actually going to help me tell it, if you want to. So the story we're all going to tell together today is called Walking with the Wind. It's a story by John Lewis. So John Lewis was an inspirational civil rights activist and politician, but he was also a skilled storyteller. So I'd like to share one of his stories now, but I need help from a bunch of you to act it out, all right? So can I get some volunteers here to help tell the story? If so, can you stand up? Can some of you stand up and help me tell this story, please? We can also get some adult volunteers if anyone out there wants to come on down and help tell this story too. So folks have a couple choices. Either you can stand up and move forward just a little bit, or if you don't want to be part of the story, if you can just sit back a little further. I think we need some more people to help tell this story. If you guys want to come on down here. It's gonna be fun. You get to start, I'll tell you, the first thing you're gonna have to do is play. So if you wanna play, and feel free to come on down, or any of our teen teachers, any of you wanna join the story? We need more people to play. Come on, let's go. Awesome, thank you guys. And if anyone else wants to join in eventually, when you see how much fun we're all having up here, go for it. All right, so I'm actually gonna have you guys stand down here on the lowest level. All right, so just so you all know, you are all children right now, all right? And so as I tell this story, you can work together to act it out, okay? Are you ready? Cool, perfect. All right, so the story is called Walking with the Wind, which is included in John Lewis's biography of the same name. A bunch of us children were outside my Aunt Seneva's house, playing in her dirt yard. So yeah, this is the outside of the house down here, playing in the dirt yard. It had been a lovely day, and all of us cousins were jumping around and being rowdy. So this is the outside of the house down here. Then up here is the house. All right, so you guys are just outside the front of the house. Yeah, keep playing, keep being rowdy. But then the sky began clouding over. The wind started picking up. Lightning flashed far off in the distance. And suddenly, I wasn't thinking about playing anymore. I was terrified. Aunt Seneva was the only adult around, and as the sky blackened and the wind grew stronger, she herded us all inside. So you guys are all gonna come up here and go inside. So yeah, this is the house, like, all right? It's a small house. It's a small house, and it seemed even smaller with so many children squeezed inside. Small and surprisingly quiet. All of the shouting and laughter that had been going on earlier outside had stopped. The wind was howling now, and the house was starting to shake. We were scared. Even Aunt Seneva was scared. And then it got worse. Now the house was beginning to sway. The wood plank flooring beneath us even began to bend. And then a corner of the room started lifting up right over here. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. None of us could. The storm was actually pulling the house toward the sky with us inside it. That was when Aunt Seneva told us to clasp hands. Line up and hold hands, she said, and we did as we were told. Then she had us walk as a group toward the corner of the room that was rising. So walk over here a little bit. From the kitchen to the front of the house, we walked, the wind screaming outside, sheets of rain beating on the tin roof. Then we walked back in the other direction as another end of the house began to lift. You gotta save that side of the house now. And so it went back and forth and back and forth. A bunch of children walking with the wind, holding that trembling house down with the weight of our small bodies. So more than half a century has passed since that day, and it has struck me more than once over those years that our society is not unlike the children in that house. Rocked again and again by the winds of one storm or another, the walls around us seeming at times as if they might fly apart. It seemed that way in the 60s, at the height of the civil rights movement, when America itself felt as if it might burst at the seams. So much tension, so many storms. But the people of conscience never left the house. They never ran away, they stayed. They came together, and they did the best they could, clasping hands and moving toward the corner of the house that was the weakest. Birmingham, Alabama is tromping on black people's rights. Move on over to that corner, children, and organize the Children's March. And then another corner would lift, and we would go there. Look, Congress passes the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlaws discrimination based on race, religion, sex, or national origin. Head to that side. That's where you are needed now. Even now, here today, we know people are still dealing with racial and economic injustice, and those are some of the things that lead to people not getting enough to eat. So that's why our youth group is going to be cooking a meal at the Dwelling Place this Saturday, and why all of you are going to be making soup jars later this year. And eventually, inevitably, the storm would always settle, and the house would still stand. But we always knew another storm would come, and we would have to do it all over again. And it did, and we did. And we still do, all of us, you and I, children holding hands, walking with the wind. Thank you so much to our actors up here. And now it is time for all of us to go off to Ari together while the rest of the congregation sings us out.
I just have a quick announcement that there will be childcare during the ritual of release. We brought 2 big tubs of Legos, and Milo and Emily will be watching kids.
We move now into the time in our service where we go deeper with a prayer, the kindling of the light, a time of silent reflection, and then our centering hymn. After the prayer, we will light candles in recognition of the joys and sorrows in our hearts. When we reach this time, if you would like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand, and Martin will bring a candle to your pew. After we kindle the light, we will share a time of silence together, and then we will sing our centering hymn, number 199, Precious Lord, Take My Hand. First, though, please join me in prayer or meditation, as is your practice, as we reflect on Prayer of Storytelling by Mandy McGlynn. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. We know so many stories about you, God, Lord, King, Father, Earth Mother, Great Spirit, Universe, Holy Parent, Divine Love, Deepest Longings, Covenanted Partner. We know stories about our country and its founding too, of the values we claim as a people. We have stories about those narratives, about our values, how our values have and have not manifested in our reality. Blessed One, we also know so many stories about ourselves, some of them the same stories we tell about others. Beautiful, ugly, simple, difficult, joyous, useful, worthless. Stories about who we are, what we know, and the potentials and impossibilities of our future. Stories about the purpose and the meaning of our lives. We have countless stories buried too deep in our souls for us to even recognize them. God of discovery, help us find the strength to excavate those buried stories. Let us lean on one another as we brush them off, hold them up to the light, and find their meaning and use. May our roots nourish us so that we might grow abundantly and flower into blessings for one another and the world. Above all, Holy Parent, sing us a gentle lullaby. In the trees and the wind, in the kind words of our neighbors, in the warmth of the sun and the sparkle of the snow, Whisper to us the truest story you know, and sing it to us in notes we can never unhear. Remind us every day, every moment, that we are beloved, beloved, beloved. As we enter into our time of kindling the light and then our time of silence, let us also reflect on the life and deeds of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in preparation for our celebrating MLK Day tomorrow. Let us now kindle the light.
poem Why We Tell Stories. Because we used to have leaves, and on damp days our muscles feel a tug, painful now, from when roots pulled us into the ground. And because our children believe they can fly, an instinct retained from when the bones in our arms were shaped like zithers and broke neatly under their feathers. And because before we had lungs, we knew how far it was to the bottom as we floated open-eyed like painted scarves through the scenery of dreams, and because we awakened and learned to speak. We sat by the fire in our caves, and because we were poor, we made up a tale about a treasure mountain that would open only for us. And because we were always defeated, we invented impossible riddles only we could solve. Monsters only we could kill, women who could love no one else. And because we had survived sisters and brothers, daughters and sons, we discovered bones that rose from the dark earth and sang as white birds in the trees. Because the story of our life becomes our life. Because each of us tells the same story, but tells it differently. And none of us tells it the same way twice. Because grandmothers, looking like spiders, want to enchant the children, and grandfathers need to convince us what happened because of them. And though we listen only haphazardly with one ear, we will begin our story with the word and.
All aboard, just get on board, get on board. All aboard, just get on board, get on board. Shout hallelujah, all aboard the freedom train. Freedom trains are coming, get on board. Freedom trains are coming, get on board. Get on board. Get on board. It's coming, won't you get on board? Get on board. Get on board. Freedom trains are coming, get on board. All aboard, just get on board, get on board. All aboard, just get on board, get on board. Shout hallelujah, gonna ride to glory land. Freedom trains are coming, get on board. Freedom trains are coming, get on board. Get on board. Get on board. It's coming, won't you get on board? Get on board. Get on board. Freedom trains are coming, get on board. You may hinder me here, but you can't hinder me there. The Lord in heaven's gonna answer my prayer. I am going home to see the elders there, to sing the songs of hope for freedom everywhere. Oh, get on board, ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. Get on board, ain't gonna let nobody turn
You are beautiful, powerful, and strong. You are beautiful, powerful, and strong. You're beautiful, you're powerful, you're strong. You are beautiful, powerful, and strong. I've been singing that song to my eldest daughter, Mirabelle, since she was 3 months old. I made it up in response to an article I read that referenced research which showed that little girls, by the time they were 2, heard something like 90% of their compliments referenced their looks and how beautiful or cute or pretty they were. And that little boys, by the same age, had heard over and over how powerful and strong they were. That these gender norms created by our culture are already beginning to be ingrained in our littlest ones before they can even talk. I was determined that this was not going to happen to Mirabelle. You are beautiful, powerful, and strong. These stories we tell, the stories our culture tells, they are powerful. They shape who we are and how we think about ourselves. And far too often, these stories are harmful. Ridiculous, false gender norms about women have reinforced sexism in our culture and in our country for decades and centuries. And even when we know better in our heads, even when we know better intellectually, those cultural messages can be difficult to overcome. And if the cultural messages weren't enough, there's also the stories our families tell us. A former coworker of mine, we'll call him John, his family told him his whole life, from when he was a little kid growing up, that he was impatient. And so that was the story he told himself and acted it out in his life as an adult. He didn't even try to work on being patient in most of his early adulthood. He just figured out who it was as impatient. But then he had children. And he decided that it was important to him to be patient with them. And lo and behold, he discovered that he could be patient when he wanted to be. And by the time he was sharing this with me, he was a little older and his children had grown up, he had made enough progress that impatience was their story and not his. But it took a lot of time and a lot of hard work on his part to change the internal narrative that he had. Another example. Several years ago, I was at the playground with my kids and I overheard something that has stuck with me. A mother was yelling at her little daughter, who could have been at the most 2 at the time. And the words were coming out of her mouth were these: "Put your shirt down. I don't want to see those boobies. Put it down." It hurt my heart to hear that, especially knowing that likely wasn't the first nor the last time that that little girl was going to hear that sexualized body-shaming message from her mother, let alone from the culture around her. 2-year-olds don't have any sense of modesty, and they shouldn't at that age. They're comfortable running around naked if you let them because they have no shame about their bodies, and they shouldn't. What story is that little girl going to grow up with about her body and her sexuality? Whether it's body shaming, impatience, or any number other of cultural or familiar stories, there are stories that we will tell about ourselves, stories that inform who we are, even if they aren't based in reality, even if they cause us harm. Do you have any stories like this? Are there any stories that have been told to you over and over that you now tell yourself, that if held up to the light of truth, justice, and love, would be shown to be false, unworthy, and harmful? What are the stories in your life that might need some closer examination? If you have any, and I imagine all of us probably have at least one, if not a few, if you have any, the good news is we aren't stuck with the stories we have. We can choose to change them, to tell different stories, and redefine who we are and how we think about ourselves. The first task, according to author and researcher Brené Brown, is to figure out and name what the story in a given situation is that we're telling ourselves. She calls these sucky first drafts. Well, not actually sucky, but you get the drift. Brown actually encourages people to write down these stories that we're telling ourselves, and not the sanitized version that we would share in public, but the real story we've got going inside in our heads, which is often, for some of us, fairly negative. If you're going to work to change a story you're telling yourself, you first have to know what it is you're trying to change. And that means being aware that you're telling yourself a story and that it's not just the truth. And then the second task is to take ownership. Every day of the year, we have the opportunity to take ownership of the stories we've been told, to let go of the ones that have been harmful, and to create healing in ourselves and in the world by putting new stories in place. Stories that affirm our inherent worth and dignity. Stories that lift up goodness and hope. Stories that promote healing and wholeness. This is not easy work. Oftentimes, these stories we tell ourselves feel safe and comfortable. We're familiar with them. They're what we know. Letting go of a story that has been our companion for years, decades, even if we know it's harmful, can be challenging. The idea of bracing a new story, even one that is better for us, can be scary. Above all, it simply can be hard to rewire ourselves and make the change. A friend of mine has attention deficit disorder and remained undiagnosed until he was in his early 20s. He struggled so much in school as a kid that he always thought he was stupid. He knows that not to be true now. Tests have shown he's actually highly intelligent. He just has a learning disability. But he can't shake that story that he lived for so long, that he was slow and stupid. His head knows better, but his heart, his body, his emotional system, they're still stuck in the past. His childhood story lingers, despite the efforts of his intellect. Most of us probably have some version of this story for ourselves. A story we tell ourselves that just isn't true. One of the stories I tell myself about who I am has been around creativity. I'm not very creative, I said at a staff retreat a few years ago, and the staff pushed back at me almost immediately. That's not true. You're very creative administratively. You come up with ideas in terms of doing new things with administration that would never have occurred to us. So in my head, I understood what they were saying, but it didn't resonate at all. I had this story. It was so deeply ingrained in me. And so they said, well, here, let's give you some examples. And so finally, they managed to get me to accept in the moment, at least, to say, okay, fine, maybe I'm a little creative. But it was hard. Here's the thing. These false, harmful stories, they aren't just internal. They don't just exist in our individual lives. We started by talking about the harmful stories our culture tells women about what's most valuable about them, your looks and appearance. And there are so many more of those harmful stories out there. One of the most common ones is that we are a land of equal opportunity, that anyone can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, if they work hard enough. The reality, of course, is that our starting conditions dramatically impact our chances of success in life. Growing up in poverty means you are far less likely to reach the middle class, let alone become wealthy, compared to folks born in the middle class or above. We love in our country to lift up individual examples of those who have risen from the poorest of poor to gain great wealth in their lives in an attempt to prove how true this story is. But the individual examples actually run counter to the broader statistical reality. Income inequality and social mobility are both decreasing in our country, and little is being done to shift the tide. Another problem with the pull yourself up by your bootstraps story we tell is that it puts individuality on a pedestal. We celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day tomorrow, and we can see this idolization of individualization even in the stories we tell about Reverend Dr. King. We tend to lionize him as a person and lift up his I have a dream speech and the impact he had as one person, while too often failing to recognize the huge impact of the civil rights movement he led, was due to the power of the people and of community organizing. That story that Sam shared this morning in our first reflection from John Lewis is actually countercultural. It talked about how the people made a change, right? I remember in 6th grade when we were doing Black History Month, we had all of these individual biographies that we did focused on each day. This person did this person did this. By themselves was the implication. The same is true of the story we tell about Rosa Parks, right? If you heard the story I did growing up in our country, it was that Parks sat down and started a movement, right? Like she did it all by herself. But she didn't actually randomly decide in the moment to take a stand. It was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. Her action was deliberate and pre-planned with a whole group of people, with hundreds of people ready to begin a boycott once she deliberately didn't give up her seat. The community organizing and intentional planning that happened ahead of time was what made her individual action so powerful. And so this story of individualism making a difference and being able to do that actually creates a barrier, makes us separate, and prevents us from organizing together and finding our power for more change. We have lots of great American stories. How about the one that we are the land of the free? And yet somehow in the land of the free, we incarcerate people, we put them in prison and in jail at a higher rate than any other country in the world, including all those totalitarian and repressive regimes we supposedly despise. We represent as a country 5% of the world's total population, and yet we house 25% of the entire global population of people in prison. 1/4 of all the people who are in prison in the entire world are in prison in the United States. And yet we're only 5% of the world's population. So much for the land of the free. And that's not even getting into the completely disproportional incarceration of people of color. The stories we tell, they matter. They have a real impact on the world. So how do we move forward? How do we start changing these stories? Paradoxically, it can be as easy and as challenging as simply changing the stories we tell. The story of the founding of our country is told in history books, is taught to us in school through a pretty positive, whitewashed lens. We don't learn much in school about the genocide and slaughter of the native peoples who populated this land up until the arrival of the white Europeans. As but one simple example of the perspective of the story we have, we talk about Christopher Columbus discovering America in 1492. There's some songs that people sing about that. I sang that song as a kid, right? Did the Native Americans who lived here not know about the existence of the place they were living in? It was only discovered from a white European perspective. From a Native American perspective, you could consider 1492 as the year the invasion began. The stories we tell matter. How we tell them matters. And so coming back from the real big picture, back to your slightly more local, your settled minister, Reverend Heather, retired less than a year ago. She will be forever intertwined with this church, this congregation. She will always be a part of your story. And already now, in this time of interim ministry, your story is changing. And it will change again with the arrival of your new settled minister a year and a half from now. If our stories matter and inform our actions and who we are in the world, if how we tell our stories matter, what stories do you all tell about Winchester Unitarian Society that you want to keep? And are there any that might need changing? In our own lives, the same simple yet complicated truth remains. Once we've named and taken ownership of our stories, we can then work on creating new stories about ourselves, our lives, our country, and our world to take their place. And actually integrating those new stories we've created can be really hard work. Naming for ourselves that we're not impatient or that we are creative is easy in terms of the scale of this work. Truly teaching and knowing through our whole being that this is true is complex. Recognizing and naming the realities of systemic racism and oppression in our country is a difficult task in and of itself, and then actually changing these ingrained patterns of oppression in our systems and our culture is a whole order of magnitude higher, more challenging work. Speaking the truth out loud is one powerful tool we have in our toolbox when looking to change the stories that exist in our lives and in our country. Whether it's gently and lovingly reminding yourself that you are not actually impatient or that you are creative, or singing songs to those you love to counter harmful gender messaging in our culture, or speaking out in public to bring light to the distorted reality and false myths that if anyone works hard enough, they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, or that we live in the land of the free. All of those are loving and compassionate things to do that can and do make a difference. They help us change the stories we tell. Another tool for our personal toolbox can be reality checking our stories. In her book, Rising Strong, Brené Brown, who I referenced before, she tells the story of going on a swim with her husband, where she experienced him being checked out, disconnected, and emotionally not present. And they were swimming, so she couldn't really talk, right? It wasn't just like lazy swimming. They were swimming across a lake, so they were doing some serious swimming. And so she had the story that she started telling in her head that went sort of like this. He thinks I look bad in this bathing suit. He doesn't find me attractive anymore. We're not connected the way we used to be. I'm not good enough. The thing is, that was just the story she was telling herself. When they got back to the dock, and she worked up the courage, it took her a few minutes, when she worked up the courage to name what she was worried about, it turned out there was something entirely different going on for him. I had a dream last night where I drowned, and it was making me panicky today while we were swimming. I was stuck in anxiety. Sometimes the stories we're telling about ourselves are very different than the reality other people are experiencing. Brown suggests in situations where we're struggling to start with, so the story I'm telling myself about what's happening right now is. And you can say that to yourself, or if you're with someone that you can talk to, you can say that, you can share with them, which then gives other people a chance to share what they're experiencing. One more tool for your story-changing toolbox, making your voice heard. When we show up in places, at meetings, or with your family, at community events, when we show up in conversations where stories are being shared, and we share the story we know to be true, and others do that too, we then contribute to the creation of a shared experience that's multifaceted. If we only ever hear one story, we really don't know enough. We don't have much of an opportunity to change, to be confronted by something different. So you can show up and tell your version of stories, and you can show up and listen to other people doing the same, and give everyone the opportunity to think, perhaps, in a new way about reality. Which, side note, is the plan for what we're going to do after the service today at our Ritual of Release event. We're going to work on creating a shared story that contains many different truths. So, the stories we tell can and do shape the reality we live in, both individually and in community. May we make sure that the stories we tell are worth telling and shape our lives and the lives of those around us in the way that we want them to be shaped. Let us treat ourselves and those around us with love and kindness, and let us change the stories, bit by bit, piece by piece, until the larger stories that are problematic begin to unravel. And then let us create new stories that help create a world that is in line with our beliefs and values. I began by sharing the song I made up for my daughters to try and help them combat the pervasive sexism they encounter in our culture from a very young age. The older one knows it through and through. They both do at this point. If I start, "You are beautiful," they will often finish it right off with, "powerful and strong." I hope I have helped them at least a little bit to change the story our culture tells them about what it means to be female in our country, especially as they encounter more and more highly gendered messaging. I hope the song helps both of them, even if just a little bit, find some of the tools they'll need to fight that battle on their own. Because culture is pervasive and powerful, despite our best interactions to counteract it. I have faith in them that they can do it. And I have faith that all of us can do it too. Stories are powerful. Life-affirming stories inspire us and give us strength and courage. We should tell those stories often, integrating them into our souls. And the false stories, the harmful ones, the ones that run contrary to our true spirit, the ones that are life-taking instead of life-giving, those stories can and need to be changed. And we are the ones to do that. We owe ourselves and the world nothing less than giving it a shot. Because my song is true of each and every one of you as well. You are beautiful, powerful, and strong. Amen.
We now come to the part of our service where we are asked to make an offering to help support this church and its many ministries. Unfortunately, Kirsten Hart, our alto soloist, is under the weather this morning, and so we will miss hearing her beautiful voice, and I know we all wish her a speedy recovery. But we will still hear the music of Florence Price. John will be playing Florence Price's piece, Adoration, on the organ. The morning offering will now be generously given and gratefully received. Those who wish to do so are invited to join in our unison affirmation. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst difference, and to embody transformative love. Please now rise in body or spirit to join in singing our closing hymn, number 323 in the gray hymnal, Break Not the Circle.
Friends, may we release and let go and heal the stories of harm and shame and negativity that live in our lives, that live in our country. And may we instead embrace and integrate into our beings stories of hope and love and joy and goodness, so that we may bring that into our lives and into the world. Go and be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the words in your order of service for the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our service is ended, but our life of service continues. Please, let's enjoy some refreshment in the Sims room and then gather back here around noon for our first ritual release session.